Madam Minister, Mr. President of the Arctic Circle, dear Olafur Ragnar Grimsson, dear friend, thank you so much for those words. Dear friends of the polar regions, but more specifically, dear Arctic defenders, ladies and gentlemen, I'm absolutely delighted to be here in Berlin with you this afternoon and to have the opportunity to address you. Above all, I'm delighted that this Arctic Circle meeting is taking place in these times of uncertainty. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to all the organizers, of course, President Grimsson, but all the Arctic Circle leaders, of course, but also the German and local authorities who are hosting us here today. It is indeed essential that we continue to show our collective concern for the future of the Arctic, regardless of prevailing circumstances, and I would even say because of the prevailing circumstances. I'm not going to dwell on how the current geopolitical situation and tensions are interfering with the usual Arctic issues. There's no need to go back very far in time to remember that the Arctic has very often been at the center of the world's greatest tensions, because it is where East and West meet, because it is representative of both a boundary and a connection, because it embodies an essentially untamed, even sometimes hostile world, where human sovereignty is still uncertain and therefore always subject to change. What is really new and what distinguishes our era from the past is that we do not longer ignore the emergence of information leading to the need to preserve an environment that we once believed immutable and which we now know is very fragile. And to the understanding of the important role of these unique northern ecosystems for the entire planet, its climate, its biodiversity, and its natural balance. That this emergence of the environmental issues don't just add to the Arctic equation, it radically changes the game. With these new challenges, the Arctic ceases to be the exclusive concern of the riparian states and their inhabitants. It becomes a challenge for all of humanity and its future. I believe this consciousness is the reason why so many representatives of states, institutions, public and private sectors have joined us today. They're all taking action for the Arctic, for our planet and its preservation. In addition to the strategic considerations we are familiar with, I believe that our challenge is to connect these matters with broader environmental issues. This also means, and above all, finding ways of progressing in this specific context. In this respect, I'd like to take this opportunity to make 3 observations which outline 3 ways to address this situation. The first observation is that we have to make is that the geopolitical challenges encountered by the Arctic since February 2022 are not the only complications faced by environmentalists. Indeed, ecological issues are rarely isolated and very often go hand in hand with other challenges. This should never deter us from moving forward, as it is always possible to take action, even if fragmented or restricted. It is always beneficial. It is clear that protecting certain areas against harmful activities, safeguarding a few ecosystems, and limiting the human footprint, if only in certain areas, is clearly not enough to address the magnitude of the different issues. However, it is always preferable than inaction. In this context, we need to continue to support the work carried out by scientists as another way to keep making progress for both the actions that we're implementing now and those that we hope to initiate in the future in a climate of peace. And most importantly, we must remain determined to pursue what is undoubtedly the top priority for securing an acceptable future for the region, the fight against climate change. It is our collective responsibility to continue working on this and in this direction and on these issues, as we are aware that global warming is the greatest threat to the Arctic region. The second observation concerns the indigenous peoples and local communities who are fortunately represented here, which is sadly not always the case in other international fora, where the fate of their land is being discussed. It is important to recognize their valuable contribution to the region's future due to their historical connection and rights they have over it, but also through their knowledge and their ability to coexist and adapt to challenging ecosystems. Thus, it is essential to give them the possibility and the means to play a central role in the development of sound and sustainable management of Arctic resources. That is why it is vital to ensure to give IPLCs a greater voice in international discussions concerning the Arctic, and to place their perspectives at the heart of these of our discussions and of our decisions whenever they relate to their regions. Regardless of the situation, we need to continue to stand by them, to listen to them, to support them, and to help them reclaim their place and the role that they deserve. The last observation that I would like to put forward concerns the role that environmental protection could play in the current context, of course, of the Arctic region, as they could potentially contribute to the resolution of these tensions. Through their work, scientists today represent a unique capacity for facilitating dialogue. Indeed, whatever our situation and wherever we are all affected by the same environmental crisis. If we are to win our collective war against global warming, against pollution, and against biodiversity loss, it is essential that we work together. For this reason, even though it may sometimes seem complicated, we must continue to give a chance to science, to give a chance to the environment, and to these seemingly insignificant struggles that bring us together. In the Arctic, as elsewhere, this capacity to collaborate on concrete projects that serve the common good. As history has shown, once the guns fell silent, the parties involved in the Second World War learned to live together, again through projects focused firstly on energy, trade, and industry. They thus began to build a peaceful Europe. Tomorrow we have to be able to build lasting peace, which will also be achieved through cooperation, local or otherwise, with the promise of a new capacity for dialogue. More importantly, with the promise of a better future. So once the guns fall silent, these projects must be ready to unite yesterday's enemies and offer them a path along which they can move forward, and we can move forward together. That is also why we need to continue to move forward on all environmental projects. Because each of these projects, each of these ambitions will be useful tomorrow for peace, for the region, but also for the world. So Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, taking action despite the challenges, standing close to those who are the Arctic, creating ways of cooperating and building together a better environment. These are the three ways that will enable us to move forward, despite the challenges, the many difficult challenges, and not give up in our efforts to help the Arctic region. It is a necessity for us, a necessity, of course, for future generations who will be greatly impacted by what we decide to do today. In other times, in other places, many of us were invited to engage in a discussion on the Arctic as a territory of dialogue. I think you all remember that. Those who invited us at the time have since withdrawn from the dialogue. But it is important that we meet to find solutions for a world where war and environmental degradation are not the only horizon. It is up to us to prove that this is feasible, that this is, of course, what we all want, and that we will achieve this major goal all together. Thank you very much.